Grief, when it settles into a family as deeply intertwined as the Forresters and Logans, does not simply fade with time. It reshapes the rhythm of everyday life, turning even the most familiar spaces into quiet reminders of what has been lost. Luna's absence had not been an event that passed. It had become a presence of its own, lingering in conversations that trailed off too soon, in glances that carried unspoken memories, in the silence that followed any mention of her name. They had tried, in their own ways, to move forward, to honor what had been without allowing it to consume what remained. But the truth was far more complicated. Loss, especially one that felt sudden and unfinished, does not resolve itself neatly. It waits, unresolved, beneath the surface, ready to resurface when least expected. At the hospital, far removed from the polished facades of their homes and boardrooms, Finn immersed himself in work with an intensity that bordered on necessity. Medicine had always been his refuge, a space where logic prevailed, where problems could be identified, treated, and, in the best cases, resolved. But even here, surrounded by structure and purpose, his thoughts refused to remain contained. Luna's memory followed him into every corridor, into every patient interaction, into the quiet moments between procedures when his mind drifted despite his efforts to anchor it. He had seen loss before, had treated it in countless forms, yet this felt different. This was personal. This was something that did not yield to reason. It was during one of those long, unbroken stretches of duty that the unexpected arrived. The emergency call came without warning, cutting through the routine with the urgency that defined the hospital's most critical moments. A young woman had been brought in following a severe accident, her condition unstable, her identity unknown. The details were fragmented, incomplete, the kind of case that demanded immediate attention without the comfort of context. Finn moved into action without hesitation, his training overriding the distraction that had plagued him for days. There was no room for personal reflection here. There was only the patient. When he first saw her, it was not recognition that struck him. It was something deeper, something instinctive, a dissonance that his mind struggled to process. The resemblance was undeniable. It was not a vague similarity, not a passing echo of familiarity. It was exact in a way that felt almost impossible, as though reality itself had fractured and presented him with something it should not have been able to replicate. Her features, the structure of her face, the subtle expressions that flickered even in unconsciousness. It was Luna. Or at least, everything about her suggested that it was. And then there was the necklace, a small, delicate piece resting against her skin, its design unmistakable. The moon-shaped pendant was not just an accessory. It was something Finn recognized with a clarity that left no room for doubt. It had been Luna's. He had seen it countless times, a quiet, personal detail that now stood before him as proof of something he could not yet fully comprehend. For a moment, everything else faded. The urgency of the situation, the presence of the medical team, the demands of the moment, all of it receded as Finn found himself suspended between what he knew and what he was seeing. Logic resisted the conclusion his instincts were pushing toward. Luna was gone. They had mourned her. They had accepted her absence as final. And yet, here she was, or someone who should not exist in this form. The moment passed quickly, forced aside by the necessity of action. The patient needed immediate care, and Finn, despite the turmoil building within him, responded with the precision his role demanded. He moved through the procedures with practiced focus, issuing instructions, stabilizing her condition, ensuring that the immediate threat to her life was addressed. But beneath that focus, the question remained, persistent and unrelenting. When she regained consciousness, the tension shifted. There was no recognition in her eyes. Finn approached her carefully, his movements controlled, his voice measured, as though any sudden shift might disrupt something fragile and essential. He spoke her name, Luna, testing the reaction, searching for any sign that the connection he felt might be reflected in her response. But there was nothing. Her gaze remained distant, unfocused, as though she were observing the world without any context to anchor it. Her confusion was not feigned. It was real, deep, and unsettling. She did not know who she was. She did not know where she was. And when Finn tried to bridge the gap, to guide her toward recognition, toward memory, he was met with a silence that felt more profound than any denial. It was not that she refused to remember. It was that there was nothing to remember. The arrival of Steffi altered the atmosphere immediately. Her presence carried a different kind of energy, one shaped by experience, by instinct, by a refusal to accept anything at face value when the stakes were this high. She entered the room expecting to support Finn, to understand what had drawn his attention so completely away from everything else. But when she saw the patient, the shift in her expression was immediate and unmistakable. Shock, then doubt, then something sharper, more controlled. She did not move toward the girl with the same instinctive recognition that Finn had felt. Instead, she observed, her gaze moving over every detail, assessing, questioning, refusing to allow emotion to override her judgment. The resemblance was undeniable, but to Steffi, that was precisely what made it dangerous. Because things that appeared too perfect rarely were. Her mind moved quickly, connecting possibilities, drawing from past experiences that had taught her how easily truth could be manipulated. And at the center of those possibilities, one name surfaced with chilling clarity. Sheila. The thought did not come as a wild assumption, but as a logical extension of everything they had endured. Sheila had a history of exploiting vulnerabilities, of using emotional fractures to her advantage, of inserting herself into situations in ways that maximized impact and chaos. The idea that she might orchestrate something like this, that she might present them with a version of Luna designed to destabilize them, was not just plausible, it felt likely. Steffi's warning came not as an accusation, but as a necessity. She urged Finn to be cautious, to step back from the emotional pull of what he was seeing, to consider the possibility that this was not what it appeared to be. Her words were grounded in concern, but also in a firm belief that allowing themselves to accept this too quickly could lead to consequences they were not prepared to face. Finn resisted, not out of defiance, but out of conviction. What he had seen, what he had felt, what stood before him, it was too real to dismiss as manipulation. He acknowledged the risks, the possibility of deception, but he could not ignore the evidence in front of him. The resemblance, the necklace, the subtle details that aligned too closely with his memories. These were not things that could be easily fabricated. Their disagreement did not escalate into open conflict, but it settled into something more dangerous, a division that would only deepen as more information emerged. When Liam and Hope arrived, the tension expanded further. They had been drawn by urgency, by the shock of what they had been told, by the need to see for themselves what could not be explained through words alone. Their reactions mirrored the complexity of the situation, hope intertwined with disbelief, recognition tempered by caution. They stood at the threshold of something that could either restore what had been lost or shatter their understanding of reality entirely. The room became a space of conflicting truths. Finn saw Luna. Steffi saw a threat. Liam and Hope saw something in between, something that demanded answers but offered none. And at the center of it all stood the girl who did not know herself. It was during one of these moments of tension, when the room had settled into a fragile silence, that something shifted. The name Forrester was spoken, not loudly, not with intention, but as part of a conversation that had drifted into uncertainty. And in that instant, the girl reacted. It was subtle, a flicker in her expression, a brief tightening of her gaze. Something that suggested recognition, not fully formed, not articulated, but present. Finn noticed it immediately, his attention sharpening as he leaned closer, searching for confirmation, for any indication that this was more than coincidence. Steffi saw it too, but her interpretation differed, her skepticism deepening rather than easing. To her, it was not proof of identity. It was evidence of something else, something rehearsed, something planted. The moment passed quickly. The girl's expression returned to its previous emptiness, her gaze drifting once more into uncertainty, as though whatever had surfaced had already been buried again. But the impact remained, because it was enough. Enough to challenge certainty. Enough to fuel belief. Enough to deepen doubt. And as each of them processed what they had seen, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was not the end of their grief. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. Something that would force them to question not only what they believed about Luna, but what they believed about each other, about trust, about reality itself. Because whether she was truly Luna or not, whether her return was a miracle or a manipulation, the effect was the same. The past had come back, and it was not going to leave quietly.